Welcome to Episode 5 of the Zech Support Legal Studies Series. Homicide law is one of the most important and complex areas of criminal law. We'll be covering everything from justifiable killings to first-degree murder. By the end of this episode, you'll have a deep understanding of how homicide is classified, the role of malice aforethought, key legal cases, and much more. Let's get started. What is homicide? Homicide, at its core, is the killing of one human being by another. However, not all homicides are considered crimes. The law distinguishes between criminal homicide, or the unlawful killings which can range from murder to manslaughter, justifiable homicide, killings deemed lawful such as self-defense, police use of force, or legal executions, and excusable homicide, killings that occur under circumstances where criminal liability is reduced or eliminated, such as cases involving insanity or accidents. Under common law, homicide requires malice aforethought to be considered murder. Malice is further categorized as either express malice, a deliberate intent to kill, or implied malice, a reckless disregard for human life. When we think of express malice, we understand that the killer specifically intended to take the life of another. When we think of implied malice, the killer acted with a reckless disregard for human life, even if there was no explicit intent to kill. A good example of implied malice is depraved heart murder. This is when someone engages in conduct so dangerous that death is a likely result. Imagine someone firing a gun into a crowded room with no specific target. This would likely qualify as depraved heart murder. Under Penal Code Section 187, California law expanded the definition of murder to include the killing of a fetus, a major departure from common law which only recognized murder if the victim was born alive. Now moving away from common law definitions, modern criminal statutes divide murder into different degrees based on intent, planning, and method. Penal Code 189, first-degree murder. This is the most serious type of murder and requires premeditation and deliberation using specific methods. Methods like poison, lying in wait, torture, bombing, and drive-by shootings, to name a few. When dealing with first-degree murder, it's good to remember the acronym DWP, not the Department of Water and Power, but deliberate, willful, and premeditated. A crucial question that courts ask is how much time is enough for premeditation and deliberation. Courts have ruled that even a brief moment of reflection can be enough to establish premeditation and deliberation. The test is not about time, but about whether the defendant had an opportunity to reflect before committing the act. Now let's talk about second-degree murder. If a killing lacks premeditation and deliberation but still involves malice aforethought, it qualifies as second-degree murder. This includes spontaneous killings that occur with intent but without prior planning. A good example of this is the case People v. Taylor, 2004. The defendant had a violent relationship with the victim. After breaking up, the defendant entered the victim's home and shot her. What he did not know was that he also caused the death of her fetus. The court ruled that even though the defendant was unaware of the pregnancy, he still acted with implied malice, making him guilty of murder. Now let's discuss the felony murder rule, Penal Code 189E. One of the most controversial doctrines in criminal law is felony murder. It holds that if someone dies during the commission of a felony, all participants can be charged with murder, regardless of intent. To be liable under felony murder, one of the following must be proven. Number 1. The defendant was the actual killer. Number 2. The defendant aided or abetted the actual killer with intent to kill. Number 3. The defendant was a major participant in the felony and acted with reckless indifference to human life. A good example of this is the case People v. Bryant, 2013. Two robbers held up a store. A security guard shot one robber, killing him. The surviving robber was charged with murder under felony murder because his co-conspirator died as a result of the felony. 2018 limitations. California amended the felony murder rule, restricting liability for murder to those who actively participated in the killing or acted with reckless disregard for human life. Now let's talk about manslaughter. Penal Code Section 192. Unlike murder, manslaughter involves an unlawful killing without malice aforethought. It is divided into 3 categories. Voluntary manslaughter. This occurs during a heat of passion or sudden quarrel. For example, a spouse catches their partner cheating and immediately kills them in a rage. If a reasonable person would have reacted similarly, it may be reduced from murder to voluntary manslaughter. Involuntary manslaughter. This occurs when someone kills without intent during a non-felony, unlawful act or reckless behavior. An example, a person fires a gun into the air during a celebration and the bullet accidentally kills someone. Vehicular manslaughter involves deaths caused by reckless or negligent driving. Gross vehicular manslaughter involves extreme recklessness, while simple vehicular manslaughter involves negligence. Causation in homicide. A defendant is guilty only if their actions were the cause in fact and proximate cause of death. Actual cause. The but-for test. But for the defendant's actions, would the victim have died? Proximate cause. The foreseeability test. Was the death a foreseeable result of the defendant's actions? Here's a hypothetical. A person fires a gun at a tree for target practice. Unbeknownst to them, a hiker is behind the tree and is struck by the bullet. The shooter could be charged with involuntary manslaughter if they acted recklessly. That wraps up today's episode on homicide in criminal law. We've explored the different types of homicide, malice aforethought, the felony murder rule, manslaughter, and key legal cases. Until next time, stay informed, stay curious, stay on the right side of the law, and remember, when you need help, you can always call Zech Support.